when she moans. My Lord heard Jerusalem when she moans. You hear Jerusalem when she moans.
I believe that American music consists of three basic ingredients: country, gospel, and the blues. And each one of those have had an influence on the other.
I'm gonna sit down on the bank, by the bank, to the river, Lord, and I am coming back.
It all came out of the church. All the singing and all the music, popular music, came out of the church, be it black or white music. It all came out of that place, that gospel background.
Well, as a little kid, you know, most of my listening came through the church and came through a lot of black gospel music.
I want to dig a little deeper in His love, dig a little deeper in His love.
Well, the Jordanaires was organized in the late 40s, and really we started singing spirituals. We sang a black spiritual with a beat. We were the first white group that sang that type of music.
That's still our first love, too.
Yeah, and that's what we actually started singing. That's where we got the name from, Jordanaires, from the Jordan River.
I want to walk a little more like my Jesus walked. I want to talk a little more like a Christian should. I want to dig a little.
The first thing I remember was the gospel singing in church. You know, I'm one of 12 kids. We were all breastfed, and Mom was in church every Sunday.
We used to go to Pentecostal church, and that's probably where I first started singing. You know, that fire and brimstone and all that jumping around, and you're 3 or 4 years old, man, that's exciting.
We sang gospel music on weekends around home for years. When we decided that that was what we wanted to do as our profession, we pretty much transferred those gospel harmonies in that particular style over to country.
The sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost.
I think music is the big common denominator. There is no race in music. So I heard somebody say one time there's only 12 notes of music in the whole world. And of course, Tchaikovsky dealt with the same 12 notes that B.B. King does.
I'd love to be remembered as a white blues man. It's really hard to separate country and blues for me. It really is.
Every woman he's loving, sure gonna get him killed.
You know, it's everyday people. It's the lives that I'd say 3/4 of us go through, you know. So we can relate to country music because it's so plain. We can relate to the blues because it's so plain.
Them kind of people that you really can't understand.
The people that always got my attention were the black people in Philadelphia, Mississippi, hanging out at the Busy Bee Cafe. There'd be some old lady standing out on the corner of the street preacher. Y'all all going to hell in there for playing that kind of music. Y'all crazy in there. Jesus is going to come down and kill all of you and blow this building up. I think, I got to get in there. Thank you, Lord, but I got to go in there.
I think that the black music that was, we called rhythm and blues back in the 50s, a lot of white kids started listening.
Big one, we tried, and you know what? Damn if I don't believe we made it.
Don't be cruel to a heart that's true.
Elvis Presley worked his first show with Slim Whitman and myself in Overton Band Shell in August of 1954. And I saw this phenomenon, and I couldn't believe what kind of effect he had on the people on the stage. I couldn't figure out what kind of music he was trying to sing. But I knew he had something, so we worked in the Louisiana Hayride in those days, and so we went back and told Horace Logan, the guy that run the show, we said, Horace, this kid's got something. I don't know what it is, but he's got something.
He came to the Louisiana Hayride. It's the first time I guess I'd seen him. I'd heard, you know, the Sun records. It was, of course, getting popular. But when he started working the Hayride and we worked with him, Of course, all the kids were crazy about him. It's just wild, you know. In fact, we were kind of scared working with him, you know.
Oh, when Elvis Presley came to town, we all knew he was going to be a star. I say we all. People who knew how hot he was. I mean, you couldn't get him off the stage with a fire hose.
When Elvis Presley was just starting, I'd carry Elvis on my shoulder, and he'd open the shows for me. And them little girls would squeal and holler. And then when he got real big, he hired me to open the shows for him. Naturally, all the girls wanted to tear my clothes off, too, just because they didn't care nothing about seeing Fair and Young. They just knew I was on the show with Elvis Presley. So they were going to tear all my clothes off.
He made me feel like I was born wrong or something. Man, look at that dude. Looks like a Greek god. I can't tell you what the feeling is to sit there and be playing your guitar and watching Elvis Presley about 10 feet from you, singing your song and getting into it. It was all I could do to keep the guitar in my lap. As a matter of fact, it was all I could do to stay in that chair.
I still remember 1954 sitting against this old black and white TV set, and all of a sudden here comes this young guy on TV, and he sang Ready Teddy. I never will forget. He pointed his finger right at the camera and he went, ready, set,
go and go. I got a gal that I love so. I'm ready, ready to rock and roll.
The Jordanaires, they had the sound that was so perfect to back the king and just encased him.
Between takes, he'd say, let's get over to piano and do I'm Bound for the Kingdom, or Heaven Will Surely Be Worth It All, or some gospel song.
Country music is the thing that produced Elvis Presley. And we don't want to forget that. I mean, Elvis wasn't the rock and roll, king of rock and roll when he started. He was a country boy, a country artist. And they can't take that away from him either.
You know I can be found sitting home all alone.
Elvis Presley went on to become the biggest music superstar of all time, with gigantic success on record, in films, and in performance as the king of rock and roll. But he began as a country music rockabilly, and Elvis remained a country radio star throughout his life.
But I think that Elvis and Carl Perkins and quite a few of the rockabilly people that got started were actually country guys that put a set of drums in the band and decided, hey, this sounds pretty good, and people started liking it, so they kept expanding on it.
Well, it's one for the money, two for the show, three to get ready. Now go, cat, go, but don't step on my blue suede shoe. Well, you can do anything but lay off my blue suede shoe.
Carl Perkins, I really just believed Carl could be one of the truly outstanding country singers and performers because he was a very electrifying act. I felt that Carl did have a very unusual style on the guitar, man. This guy can lay some low down bad licks on you.
On guitar, you know, I was influenced by everybody that ever played the guitar. You know, being from so close to Jackson, Tennessee and West Tennessee, Carl Perkins, you know, was like the innovator, you know. But I loved all the early rockabilly and country guitar players like Don Rich and the guys that played with Buck Owens.
There's one thing about the rockabilly music, it was always great danceable music, and people wanted to dance.
Yeah, come on over, baby. We got chicken in the barn. Woo, honey, come on over. We got the bull by the horn. Oh, bacon now. Whole lot of cake going on.
Jerry Lee, the biggest soul man of all from Faraday, Louisiana, came in one day and at a Carl Perkins session, we asked him to sit down at the piano and sing one for us, and I knew that Sam had found another one, you know.
Jerry's situation was he was a piano player. At that time, let's face it, guitars were really in vogue so far as quote-unquote rock and roll is concerned. I was out of town, as a matter of fact, when Jerry came in and auditioned. Jack Clement was at the studio. I said, you know Crazy Arms? He said, I know some of it. We'll do it. So he did it and sort of made up some of the words, and that was the take. Sam Phillips came back the following Monday, and I played him the tape, which was Crazy Arms. I started the tape, and the piano started playing. Before it ever got to the vocal, he reached over and stopped the machine. Said, I can sell that.
For one brief, shining moment in Sam Phillips' Sun record studio in Memphis, four legends of the Rockabilly era were all in the same place at the same time.
Elvis and Carl and Jerry Lee, all of us had roughly the same background. You know, we lived within 100 miles of the Memphis radio stations. And there was programs on the air like Dewey Phillips' Red Hot and Blue, which they called race music at the time. And we grew up on that kind of music. I would have never written a song like Big River if I hadn't had the black gospel and blues influence.
Now I tossed the weeping willow how to cry, and I showed the clouds how to cover up a clear blue sky, and the tears that I cried for that woman gonna flood you, Big River, and I'm gonna sit right here until I die.
Johnny Cash, when he came in with Marshall Grant and Luther Perkins, and after we got through auditioning, I said, Johnny, we got an interesting sound here, and let's just kind of keep it like that and go with this another time or two and see what happens. Well, I knew in my mind that, wait a minute, when you got that vamp going, tune da da tune da da tune da, you know, and I thought, this is John R. Cash, as he wanted to be known.
Hello, I'm Johnny Cash.
When I first came to Nashville, I saw Johnny Cash on stage. I was sitting in the audience. He walked out on that stage. And to this day, and probably till the day I die, even though we forget most things, I'll never forget that feeling. You know, it was just the way he moved and the way he twitched. It just suited me just fine. And I just thought that he was the sexiest thing I'd ever seen.
Johnny Cash can walk out on stage today, just tear an audience to pieces, you know. I learned something. I said, boy, don't ever count country music out. And they don't, especially if you've got that rockabilly, which he had. Johnny had it.
I think the secret of the success of rockabilly music was country music with an edge.
I first heard that good old rock and roll and rockabilly. I don't know, it was great. I didn't think about it then. I just knew it turned me on, you know, Buddy Holly and songs like Rave On and Peggy Sue and Elvis with the Hound Dog and all that. It was, those were great days.
Rock, 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 everybody. Rock, 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 everybody. Rock, 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 everybody. You rock it and you rock it and you rock it around. Roll, 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 everybody.
To form what we call rock and roll, it came out of R&B and it came out of hillbilly music, the rockabilly. It came out of pop music. It was a new kind of music that all of us growing up in that period related to. It was something that drew us all together, and the people who lived through the birth of rock and roll know what I'm talking about.
Well, now, what do you think? Oh, it's crazy music, man. That sends me, Jack. That music sends me, man. It sends me. You gotta dig that music all the way. Rock and roll is cool, Daddy, and you know it.
Rock and roll was happening in pockets all across the country. Buddy Holly in Lubbock, Texas. And Don and I in Knoxville, Tennessee, we were the only kids in school with DuckTales, you know, and all that combination of country and R&B, I guess you could say.
Wake up, little Susie, wake up. Wake up, little Susie, wake up.
We
we'd get together, Don and I would, and listen to Bo Diddley. And he played a great lick on that, Bo Diddley, where did he go? And it was a lick like... Of course, Don, when he got his recording contract, he expanded on that and he played...
When all that rock and roll was really hot, I was 10 years old, and of course, being a teenager and a kid going into her teens, I was very influenced by that. But we weren't really allowed to listen to a lot of that music because of the religion, the religious background. My grandpa being a Pentecostal holy roller preacher, and I was already bleaching my hair and wearing short skirts, and they thought I was going to hell anyway. But I did love that music. I loved it because it was young and youthful and energetic and playful.
Love's gotta be warm, and love's gotta be right, and this ain't no ice cube to keep the ripping night, so don't you dish me out the blue love.
Well, rock and roll did take a bad rap there from the older generation, but hasn't it always been that way? Young people have their music, and the older generation just can't understand it. Country music at that time was taking a back seat to this rockabilly and rock and roll. Almost every kind of music was having to sit back and say, wait, what's happening?
By the late 50s, the emergence of rockabilly established a youth audience for many of country music stars. 10 years later, kids in California discovered country music again. This time, they called it country rock.
In the late 60s and early 70s in Southern California, there was a kind of a graduating class of a lot of people that became real instrumental figures in the beginning of country rock. The Byrds had just gone through a sort of a transformation, and they had done an album called The Sweetheart of the Rodeo, which was something that we all bought and went, this is it. This is a great direction for music.
Groups like the Byrds were the real, true seminal groups of country rock, because they went back to even songs like He Was a Friend of Mine, which is a really old folk song. They recycled these folk songs and used electric instruments because they wanted to be able to play in the big rock and roll concerts, but they wanted to do something Americana.
Graham Parsons and I worked in the Byrds together about 6 months, and then he left. And we had talked about doing some country stuff and pursuing that sweetheart path a little further. And we started this group, the Flying Burrito Brothers. We could not get played on country radio. We could not get played on rock radio at the time. 1969, we were too country for rock and roll FM, and we weren't country enough for the country stations.
Graham Parsons had a vision of music. I believe he called it cosmic music. He and other people on the West Coast back in the late 60s and early 70s started to try to put their own version of country music together, which was very true to the honky-tonk roots, but also had a little bit of the rock and roll flash and energy.
I think that Graham achieved something completely different and unique with his vision, the rock poetry that he brought to the real traditional roots of country music. And I really believe that Graham was the person who forged all those pieces together and gave me the sense of direction that I was lacking, you know, when I first came to Nashville and when I was up in New York.
We came out west together with a common desire.
I'd have to rank Emmylou Harris very high in contemporary country music because she's a watershed artist. I think it had a lot to do with her idealism as an artist. She really loved country music, and she loved it with her soul and a fierceness like a mama lion. It wasn't ambition with Emmylou, it was love. It was really grounded love.
I owe, I think, my career to Emmy because she really exposed me to not only the traditions of country music in Nashville, but to the country rock side of country music, which was the Graham Parsons and all that stuff. I feel like I went to college with Emmylou.
I don't know why this movement happened on the West Coast. I guess Los Angeles at that period of time was there was a lot going on, a lot of excitement, and youth is sort of they gravitate toward where the action is.
I didn't listen to Linda Ronstadt till after I was aware of Emmylou's stuff. I definitely, the very first time I heard her voice, I was knocked out. I thought there was such power there and such strength in her vocals. I'm gonna say it again, you're no good, you're no good, you're no good. When I heard Linda Ronstadt for the first time, that's when I said, this is what I want to do. And it was, you know, it was country to me, but there was something else there that I had never heard before, and I was just blown away by that music.
Mr. Bojangles, Mr. Bojangles, won't you dance?
The Nitty Gritty Dirt Band first came to Nashville, I believe it was 1970. You know, here we were, a bunch of sort of scruffy, long-haired guys from Southern California that played rock and roll, and there was a bit of suspicion, I think, that we weren't really into country music and didn't really respect the traditions, which couldn't have been further from the truth. People like Bill Monroe and Flatt and Scruggs were our idols.
In 1971, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band assembled some of country music's greatest legends to record the landmark folk country album, Will the Circle Be Unbroken?
I hear echoes of what we started out in doing in country rock, especially today in country music. It's started to get a lot more freer in terms of the beat that's allowed. The sounds are a little harder. And I think if we really looked at what country rock has to offer in this generation, we'd find if there was a focus on it, we'd bring in a much bigger demographic than we could possibly imagine.
The rock and roll sensibility finally reached Nashville in the mid-70s when a group of artists grew their hair long and insisted on taking control of their own music. They called them outlaws.
This time, if you want me to come back, it's up to you. But remember, I won't allow the things you used to do. You're gonna have to toe the mark and walk the line.
The outlaw movement came in, which I consider really more an argument over production control. Willie and Waylon and some of the other artists wanted a larger part in the way their records were made. Up until then, it was pretty much the producer as dictator. The artist would come in off the road, the producer would hand them 10 or 12 songs and say, here's your next album, learn them, and we'll be cutting this afternoon. And if the artist didn't like it, that was just too bad.
Back then, there was a certain way you were supposed to dress. There's certain kind of song you're supposed to sing. And I think the movement came where we just sort of bulled up and said, well, I think this way would be better than that. And we don't care what you say, that's the way we're going to do it.
Take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more.
The outlaw movement is what really broke the mold of the Nashville sound record. Back then, you had to cut in the studios owned by the record companies or the studios they told you to record in. You had to use their engineers, their musicians. The only person the artist got to bring that was theirs was themselves. And Waylon Jennings had a belly full of it. And he went over to Tom Paul Glazer's studio and started doing the Outlaw stuff that turned out to be in that Outlaw album.
One time, Jane Pauley asked me on an interview, she says, now here you are, you're making a lot of money. Said, why do you wear Levi's and cowboy shirts when you could be wearing beautiful suits and everything? I said, because I can afford to wear.
In Texas, little towns like Dripping Springs, for example, that nobody ever heard of except Willie, and about 100,000 people would show up. The industry was amazed.
Willie Nelson called me one time and he said, Waylon, you got to come down here. He says, I think I found something. So he booked me in the Armadillo Club. And I got down there and I was backstage. Willie and his family were out front. And I looked out from the curtain and there's all these long-haired kids. And I thought, man, what's he got me into this time?
I realized that there's people over there, young people who wanted to hear not only my music, but a lot of good country music that weren't being exactly welcomed with open arms in all these venues around the place and these beer joints around the place. So I said, well, why don't I go down to the Armadillo and see how they like what I do.
That's the first time I'd seen it or been before almost an all teenage audience, and that's what it was. And it was the Armadillo Club, and it spread.
Wow, what an amazing thing to say. It seems so simple, yet I couldn't have written that.
Yeah, I think what Willie and Waylon did in the 70s was really important for the music business. It was good that Willie and Waylon weren't locked into anything, that their minds were still open, like I try to keep mine open.
There ain't no good in an evil-hearted woman, and I ain't cut out to be no Jesse James. And you don't go writing hot checks down in Mississippi, and there ain't no good chain gang.
I didn't identify with the outlaw movement. I very much respected it. Some of my all-time favorite country artists were involved in it, but our records at that time, you could only find them in the rock bins in most places. I used to say, I'm not an outlaw, I'm an outcast.
Never went down to Georgia, he was looking for a soul steal. He was in a bind because he was way behind and he was willing to make a deal. When he came across this young man sewing on a fiddle and playing it hot, and the devil jumped up on a hickory stump and said, boy, let me tell you what, I guess you didn't know it.
Now, we're talking the Southern rock era. It swept the South, it swept the nation. And I wanted to rock it. I was born to boogie, and I wanted to boogie.
Hank Williams Jr. is so important in country music. I think that he influenced a lot of people, even myself, out there as far as songwriters, that, hey, you don't have to sit there and fantasize about a subject to write a song. All you got to do is live life and just tell it like it is.
I am very proud of my daddy's name, all of his kind of blues, and my blues ain't played this system. Stop and think it over, put yourself in my unique position. If I get stoned and sing all night long, it's an old family tradition. Don't tell me.
And I did have a lot of Southern rock friends. That's what was happening. They were really big. The whole South had a love affair going with it because it was very prideful.
Oh, Tennessee River and the mountain man, we play together in Mother Nature band.
In the late 1970s, Alabama brought the rock concept of a band to country music.
We started working at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, at a little bar there on the beach, right on the ocean. You had one night you'd have 300 college kids. The next night you'd have some NASCAR race fans there, or you'd have the coal miners from West Virginia one night. All these people had different songs that they wanted to hear.
My home's in Alabama.
Alabama's blend of honky-tonk, country rock, and pop balladry has made it the most successful group in country music history.
Southern born and southern bred.
Country music was born in the South, for the most part. So was racing, NASCAR racing, from the days that they were going out on the weekends to see who had the fastest tanker moonshine hauler, you know. That's where it was born.
I hit the road running wide open, out on the edge of the envelope. The thunder rolls, my wheels are smoking. Too much to lose control. Running wide open. Spent my life living in the fast lane.
In 1980, a movie called Urban Cowboy described a new country lifestyle emerging in Texas. Its success ignited an entire era of pop crossover country sounds.
I was looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for love in too.
Urban Cowboy, obviously, that's kind of a benchmark that we all refer to, and it did take country music to in a mass appeal sense that we had not had before, and also brought a lot of radio stations into the country music format.
Oh, I got some country music.
This is International Country Music Month, October.
Back then, a crossover record was defined as, for me, was one of my country records would start to get played on a rock and roll radio station, you know. Country at that point became very vogue.
And if you listen to the Urban Cowboy, the soundtrack, there's a lot of music in there. It's really, really great music. It's really not that country, but it introduced these people saying, hey, this is what country's all about. I'm with them.
I think that movie probably sold more hats, more cowboy hats and boots in New York City than any amount of advertising ever could have, because while people could not identify, a lot of city people would not identify with country music and the traditional country artists and the country artists in the nudie suits and that sort of thing, they did identify with John Travolta. He kind of legitimized the Western way of life and music.
But I have this dance for the rest of my life.
I think that it was a great era for country music in the sense that it brought a lot of attention to country music, and it was probably the precursor of what's going on right now.
Out in the country past the city limit sign where there's a honky-tonk near the county line. The joint starts jumping every night when the sun goes down. They got whiskey, women, music and smoke. It's where all the cowboy folk go to boot scoot boogie.
I think that rather than being based on a fad like the urban cowboy boom of country music a few years back, this explosion has been from the right place. It's been an explosion of talent. It's been an explosion of artistry, not just at the entertainer level, but also at the producer level, the engineer level.
I don't like this deal, so I'll get out, but I still can. I don't wanna be just another heart in your hand.
I think the recent success of country music and it being the #1 music, I think it's real simple. I think it's kids.
I think it sounds a whole lot better than the headbanging stuff.
For any genre to break through and sell millions and millions of records, it has to be the youth.
Young people discovered this music on their own, and it's their music. They've embraced it as theirs, just as the generation before did the Beatles and Elvis. They embraced them as they found them.
People that didn't even know what country music was or care about it, now they have their favorites.
I love George Strait.
Emmylou Harris.
Merle Haggard.
Brooks and Dunn.
John Michael Montgomery.
Alan Jackson.
Reba McEntire.
Garth Brooks.
Garth Brooks. Garth Brooks.
Easy for a man who's strong to say he's sorry or admit he's wrong. Never lost anything I ever been, but I've never been in love like that.
The
biggest act in country, of course, is Garth Brooks, and he's taken country and rock and roll like Elvis did, and intertwined it all together and made something really, really big out of it.
Operator, please connect me with 1982.
Randy Travis started it all. Garth kind of just slammed the door wide open when he went through. But now there's been 35 acts go to platinum, I believe, since Garth happened 5 years ago.
I think it's probably one of the most creative genres of music right now, and as where there are a lot of styles to be dealt with.
It came from heavy metal and pop and R&B and bluegrass, folk music. I mean, country music has been where everything has been poured into, and what's coming out is young country, and it's hot and it's hip and it's happening and it's fresh and it's exciting.
These days in country music, I think fans have come to expect a lot more of a show.
Don't tell my heart, my achy, breaky heart, I just don't think he'd understand.
It seems like the first thing they say, well, how tall is he? Well, he's 5'11". Well, that's pretty good. How much do you weigh? Well, he weighs 145. Well, that's good. He's slim then, yeah. Well, and then they say, how's he look in jeans? Well, he looks okay in jeans. Does he wear a hat? Well, yeah, he'll wear a hat if we want him to. And the last thing they ask you and say, oh, by the way, can he sing?
Let's get down to where it really is. It's not country at all. It's 1970s rock and roll.
What I did was right for the times when I did it, and what people are doing today is right for these times. It's called growth, and we have to go with it.
The lines between rock and roll and country music were very blurred. For a long time, people tried to separate, well, country music and rock music, they don't have anything in common, but they have everything in common. They're born out of the same inspiration of self-expression. When that started happening in the last few years, that's when people started dancing to country music again.
The country dance phenomenon is really mind-boggling. It's not just your old guard country fans, it's everyone.
Country music fans are from all walks of life. Used to be you saw a lot of pickup trucks in the parking lot. Today you'll see a lot of Mercedes and several limos.
The reason we've got the fans and the country so hot today is because there was not that market of pop was not available to them. It just kind of disappeared. It went so many different directions, alternatives and new waves and punks and funks and R&B and rap, and it just all split up and disintegrated.
I caught myself listening to classic rock stations, and I know a lot of my friends were, so I got to thinking, you know, now if people are choosing to listen to music that's 20 years old, that means there's something wrong with the new music. Country music was smart enough, I think, to see that and say, okay, we've got a lot of people here that nobody's catering to.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock at Young Country, and this is Katie Pruitt. On the way, we got some Garth Brooks coming up for you. Also, you're going to be hearing some Vince Gill and some Brooks and Dunn on Young Country.
They don't see a barrier between buying a Garth Brooks album and buying a ZZ Top or a Nirvana. See, they feel very comfortable having Nirvana and Clay Walker in the same album collection.
If I said I'm still in love with you, it's just the tequila talking.
When you see a guy come from out of nowhere and one day he's waiting tables at Max, and then 6 months later he's, you know, got the #1 record on the charts, then everybody goes, yes, it can be done. We know it can be done.
Yes, I feel like in a singing opera. Fill the glass up to the top. I stood with loving her, but I don't know when to stop.
I was from Korea,
before I went on, this warm-up group from Korea was singing, and they were singing Country Roads, Take Me Home to West Virginia, and all that good stuff. And when they finished, I went over there, oh man, you guys are good, you're really good. Hey, where'd you learn that song? And they just went, they didn't understand English. They did not speak English. Imagine that. To go to the trouble of learning a song in another language without knowing what the hell it meant. That's the impact that country music has internationally.
I've always thought music was a universal language, and it's proved over and over when our music can be hits in foreign countries like Japan and like England and Ireland and Germany and all.
All of us involved in country music should be ambassadors for our art and our craft. I think country music is modern-day folk music, and it deserves to be presented intelligently and with dignity.
Country, in one sense, has gotten bigger than ever in terms of its appeal, but in another sense, the actual essence of country seems to have shrunk.
Someone asked me recently, do you think there's going to be a backlash because country music isn't very country right now? I think that's just indicative of who is making the music right now, because we are by and large more college educated. We by and large come from more urban places and have more modern influences.
I fell into a third-degree fire. I went down, 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 and flamed with fire, and it burned, 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 burning fire.
I'm proud of all the audiences that we're reaching with the new country music, the contemporary crossover, but I truly believe that traditional country music will never go out of style.
Train whistles and church bells and babies crying and 18-wheelers. Some guy riding on a tractor out in the middle of Kansas. Some cowboy out in the middle of nowhere on his horse chasing some old cow. That's what country music is to me.
And I'll dream of Sarah wherever I go.
I think that the music of the past is not just to study and put in a museum. I think that is good up to a point. But I think the way to study it is to put it on the damn, stereo and turn it up as loud as you can.
Well, why don't you love me like you used to do? How come you treat me like a worn-out shoe? My hair's still curly and my eyes are still blue. Why don't you love me like you used to do? Ain't had no loving like a hugging and a kissing in a long, long while. We don't get nearer, further, closer than a country mile. Why don't you spark me like you used to do? And say sweet nothings like you used to coo. I'm the same old trouble that you've always been through. So why don't you love me like you used to do?
Well, why don't you be just like you used to be? How come you find so many faults with me? Somebody's changed, so let me give you a clue. Why don't you love me like you used to do? Ain't had no loving like a hugging and a kissing in a long, long while. We don't get nearer or further or closer than a country mile. My hair's still curly and my eyes still blue. Why don't you love me like you used to do?
That's how it goes.
Could y'all run the demo again?